which allows for the unpredictable that we think of as a free act. So the picture develops. Go one step further to page 459. 459. And you have the editor's note at the bottom of the second column that the soul is composed of the smoothest and roundest of atoms. The smoothest and roundest of atoms. Yeah, so you have basically a materialist view of soul. He says that part of it is irrational, scattered over the rest of the frame. The rational part resides in the chest, as is manifest from fears and joy, and so forth. So the soul, then, is physically composed, pervades the whole body, a vital spirit, and being material, at death, the soul, that is to say, those small, round, smooth atoms so easily escape from the body, and so there is no immortality. But it's here that he accounts for the experience of pleasure. Because if the atoms of the soul are smooth, round, they will feel pain, they will be pushed and jagged as a result of rough atoms. Rough, jagged shapes will be troublesome to the soul. Whereas smooth, round atoms, like you get in conversation with good friends or in reasonable discussion and so forth, can provide soothing sensations of pleasure. And so there's a physiology that underlies the experience of pain. Now, what remains is to talk about reason. What is reason? Well, reason is simply an activity of the mind, the soul, caused, yes, by physical process, that simply organizes our experience and names things, which is part of the organizing process. Organizes them and names them. And the result is a purely conventional kind of language usage. Words simply have conventional meanings. But not only words, the way in which we have organized our experience in any community, in any society. Therefore, the way in which we learn to think about things and understand them, our theoretical understanding of things also is purely conventional. So if he were talking about science today, he would have a conventionalist view of science, you see. That is to say, our best scientific understandings are simply social conventions, conventional ways of talking about things, which is a view that has been held repeatedly throughout the history of science, way through into the 20th century. By no means the only one, of course, but it's one recurrent thing. Well, the final note then in this letter to Herodotus comes at the end on pages 62 and 63 when he talks about death. If there is no life after death to worry about, then death need not cause trouble in the mind. And if there is no life after death, then there will be no pain in the body. So if with death there is neither pain in the body nor trouble in the mind, death is no bother or trouble to us, you see. And so brushing off the fear of death. I suppose it should be said that this, in the face of developing influences of Eastern religions and mystery religions, was rather a welcome thing among some of the Hellenists, some of the Romans. They found it sort of liberating. Now, the outcomes of this you find then in the following selection, labeled Principal Doctrines, where the first few pages simply talk about the hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure, and the way in which that is moderated but still sustained. But the thing that I want to draw your attention to is comments on the last page, 466, about justice. About justice. For it's one thing for an individualist to pursue individual pleasure regardless of what is happening to others. But it's another thing for one with a more refined kind of hedonism to be able to pursue pleasure with utter disregard of the kinds of injustice which are so producing of pain rather than pleasure. If we're talking about social enjoyments, the benefits of society, then we've got to have some sort of an ordered society to make the pleasurable consequences assured, predictable, stable. So what then do we mean by justice? Look at the statement at the top of 466, paragraph 31. Natural justice is an expression of expediency, to prevent one from harming or being harmed by another. Expression of expediency. 33, there never was absolute justice, but only an agreement made in reciprocal intercourse, providing against the infliction or suffering of harm. So justice is a purely conventional kind of thing. And 34, injustice is not in itself an evil, nothing intrinsically wrong with injustice, but only in its consequence, in the terror excited by apprehension that those appointed to punish will discover the injustice. So you have not only a conventional kind of language, not only a conventional science, but a conventional ethic, a conventionalist ethic, no other basis. After all, if we live in a world of blind material forces, a world composed of atoms devoid of any but primary spatial properties, what basis is there for an ethic that goes beyond the pursuit of what pleasure there is in such a world? Yes, there's not going to be any. And so the concern about justice is not because of any intrinsic rights, not of any necessity for equal justice for all, but simply as a matter of social utility. Okay. And so a purely conventional kind of arrangement with no other checks on it than in terms of its hedonistic consequences. Pretty clear. Well, this is, as I say, the systematically developed kind of hedonism of Epicurus, Lucretius, And we'll find something very, very much like it in the 17th century when we get to Thomas Hobbes. Any of you familiar with Thomas Hobbes? 17th century, English man of letters, best known now as a political theorist, who, yes, had a materialistic view of the universe and human nature, sort of an atomism, rather like Democritus, a hedonistic ethic, an ethic based on a physiological explanation of pleasure and pain, okay? A conception of social justice as a conventional arrangement based on a kind of social contract in order to ensure the kind of self-preservation which is the minimum necessity in a hedonistic life. You see. So it provides sort of a paradigm, Lucretius does, of materialistic kinds of systems. One of the things which I think you'll notice on through the history of thought is that a certain kind of metaphysic, often, not always, leads to the same kind of ethic. Okay? A certain kind of metaphysic leads to the same kind of ethic. Not a complete uniformity. Sometimes it may open up in 2 or 3 other possible directions. But very frequently a hedonistic kind of ethic is the result of a materialist metaphysic, and for understandable reasons. Okay, any questions, comments there? Dr. Chappell. I don't think he would have acknowledged miracles, though I'm not sure he had a clear enough conception of natural law to be able to make a distinction between the natural and the miraculous. You see the problem? If what we call natural law is simply a conventional distinction, conventional organization of phenomena, then he could well say of some unusual act, well, there's another classificatory job that needs to be done. Now, in Lucretius, it's sometimes hard to distinguish between the poetic tradition in which a poet invokes the help of the gods, which Lucretius does, you'll see, and actual belief. Insofar as he talks about the gods as distinct from invoking them, he sees them as, at best, physical and mortal beings with very limited powers. Now, they might have superhuman powers, but they still can't harass us hereafter, so why be afraid of them? You'll see. In fact, Lucretius says that the main aim of what he is writing is to dispel the fears that have held peoples in bondage for so long. The bondage of superstitious fear. Anything else? Yeah, Janelle.
A notion of the soul is just like everything's based on material.
Yeah, does he have a notion of the soul? He uses the term soul. Like others of the Greeks, he tends to see soul and life as essentially synonymous. Unlike vitalists like Aristotle, he does not see the soul as composed of something different than matter. Soul is still composed of atoms, you see. It's not a life force of something. And unlike the dualism of Plato, soul is certainly not an eternal, immaterial entity, rational soul. No. So soul is simply a different configuration of different kinds of atoms, but as perishable as the body. Since once those small, smooth, round atoms are released from the body, there's nothing to hold them together. They're just diffused. Yeah. Okay. David?
Do you think there's anything like Christians can learn from his philosophy? I know that even though he's atheistic,
yeah.
It's good to
Yeah.
learn that pursue the middle.
Well, I suppose you could say moderation in all things. I'm not sure we have to learn that from Epicurus. But if you need to, learn it from Epicurus. No, I think that the main thing about hedonism to keep in mind is that from the standpoint of a Christian ethic, its mistake is not in regarding pleasure as good, but in regarding pleasure as the good, the highest good, the all-inclusive good. You see. After all, a Christian ethic is not exactly, ascetic, in the sense of regarding all enjoyment as bad? No, hardly. No.
In Democritus and Lucifus,
yes,
they spoke of everything occurring by a necessity.
Yeah, yeah.
Do they have the same concept? Do they have to believe there's actually this world of random and by chance?
Yeah, they still speak of causal necessity as a result of material processes, causal processes, collisions of atoms, but there is that note of randomness, you see. I think it's probably a mistake to seize on a note of randomness or indeterminacy and say, that makes freedom possible, as if freedom is nothing but a random event, you see. No, if freedom means anything, it means there is an agent who is able to choose an act without causal necessity, you see. Who's able to choose an act without causal necessity. And while they certainly have a randomness that implies without causal necessity, at least without predictability, I'm not sure they have any agent who is free to choose an act. Yeah. There's a sense in which a random act is still part of a causal chain. You see. It may be caused to go off in a random direction, but the causal chain is still there. Yeah. Incidentally, in the 20th century, when the Heisenberg principle of indeterminacy was discovered, when was that, the 1920s, thereabouts, there were some people, like John Dewey, in fact, who seized on the Heisenberg principle and said, this shows that human freedom is possible. Sort of the same move that Epicurus makes, Lucretius makes. Familiar with the Heisenberg principle of indeterminacy? That in terms of submolecular behavior, it's impossible to predict, within a certain range, both the direction and velocity of both of two particles that are involved. Okay. And there have been two constructions put upon the Heisenberg principle, which might also be put upon the indeterminacy in Lucretius. One is that there is an actual indeterminacy, an actual randomness in nature. The other is that our instrumentation has unbeknown effects, so that we're unable to predict. In other words, it may be just a confession of scientific ignorance. And I suppose you could say the same about the Lucretian swerve. Is it an actual indeterminacy? Or is it simply that we don't know the cause? And it's hard to see how to settle that one. Okay, let's move on to the second on our list, the Cynic and Stoic. And here again we back up to the Socratic schools and say something about the Cynics, yes, around 400 BC. You might want to take a look at the preamble that Kaufmann has to his section here on the Hellenists, because he has a long, juicy paragraph about the two main Cyrenaics. I take it back, did I say the two main Cyrenaics? The two main Cynics, namely, I have to check the name, it slips my mind. Slippery mind, Antisthenes and Diogenes. Antisthenes was, I suppose, what we would call today counterculture, to the fullest extent. To the extent that he would have nothing to do with normal living arrangements and made a bathtub his home, shunning all organized society, social institutions, maintaining that individuals should be completely self-sufficient and independent. So much so that his lifestyle earned him the name of an animal, the dog. And of course the Greek word for a dog is the word kune, and it's from kune that the word cynic is derived. So the Cynics literally had gone to the dogs. You see, they were regarded by virtue of their complete counter-culture, counter-establishment lifestyle as virtual, I wouldn't say outcasts, but at least they stepped outside, living outside. Diogenes in similar fashion. It's said that Alexander the Great had heard about Diogenes and went to talk to him and asked if there was anything to do with him, to which Diogenes responded, yes, get out of the light. That was his way of treating authority. Get out of my light. Get out of the sunshine. You know, get out of the way. You're blocking the light. So, that completely anti-establishment kind of attitude. The main significance of those Cynics, then, is in their appeal back to nature. Back to nature. Okay? What is fitting for us by nature? And they represent a bit of a tension that had developed even in Socrates and Plato's day in Athens, a tension between nature and custom, or convention. You see, phusis versus nomos. Nomos meaning law, or custom. You see. Aristotle's ethic was an ethic of phusis, by nature this, by nature that. You see, his whole emphasis on natures. Aristotle's likewise, rooted in the nature of a human being, with the three elements of the soul and their appropriate virtues. But the Cynics, no, they likewise are concerned about, yes, back to nature, but nature in a different sense. They see the concepts of nature in Plato and Aristotle as simply Greek conventions. Did you feel that about Aristotle's virtues? That the particular virtues he names are, in case after case, not all of them, but in many cases, the virtues of Greek aristocracy. You see? Magnificence is one of the virtues. Well, that sounds like the old Homeric aristocratic virtues. Well, the Cynics apparently saw through this. And so they really want to get back to nature, to a much more simple, independent lifestyle, without the complexity of the social structures, which had grown up, obviously, in Athenian culture, and which Plato and Aristotle were simply reforming, but maintaining. The individual in his inner self is self-sufficient, and we do not need property, we do not need governments, we do not need marriage and family, complete independence. Notice that the term cynic has come down to us with a somewhat different meaning. Fair enough? Different and yet similar. The similarity? Yeah, somebody who is cynical of established ways of doing things. Okay? Someone who's cynical about certain established beliefs. You see, the cynic in that sense. But different in that the ancient cynic was advocating